Hey everyone, today we're firstly going to be talking about the Big Mac Index. So the Big Mac Index is just an example on how every country will have price differences due to various factors. These factors can be taxes, import duties, inflation, location, and more. So the Big Mac Index compares prices in various countries or places compared to a standard country, which for the Big Mac Index is the United States. So purchasing power will always vary from country to country, and the Big Mac Index simulates the full cost of living. So for example, if in Mexico, the official exchange rate is 20.1 and the exchange rate predicted by PPP is 9.07, this is how we can calculate the Big Mac Index. Parentheses 9.07 minus 20.1 parentheses times 100 over 20.1. This is kind of similar to our GDP formulas where 20.1 will be looked at as like our base year. So for this, our answer is negative 54%. So this negative index means that price levels in Mexico are lower than we'd expect if purchasing power held true, meaning that real purchasing power is higher in Mexico than in the US. Remember, we learned that PPP is not held true because of three factors: transaction costs, non-tradables, and trade restrictions. So this would be if those weren't there. And then on the other hand, if this negative 54% was a positive Big Mac Index would prove that purchasing power is lower in these places rather than higher. Hey everyone, now I'm going to be talking about the implied exchange rate. So pretend in Norway, a Big Mac costs 40 kroner. Kroner is the currency in Norway. And in the US, a Big Mac costs $3.57, which is pretty standard on what you would go to and look at your McDonald's now. And then the implied exchange rate for this, once we compute it, would be 40 kroner over $3.57, which is 11.2 kroner per dollar. Now let's pretend we computed the actual exchange rate and we found that that was 6.51. This tells us that the kroner actually was far more expensive than the implied purchasing power parity due to the discrepancy in these numbers. The actual exchange rate does not guarantee that the same items would be sold at the same prices across the country, which is why this formula is so important. These prices may vary across different countries, and it's very valuable to use these two formulas to see how these vary across countries. Last but not least, PPP adjusted GDP. So we know that price levels vary from country to country, and they're always going to be different. But this also means that the average standard of living across countries is going to be very different. So we use the PPP adjusted GDP formula for this. The formula for this is the nominal GDP per capita in dollars times 1 over 1 minus the price level adjustment. So pretend we have Mexico here, and Mexico's nominal GDP per capita is $8,903. We multiply this times 1 over 1 minus the price level adjustment, and this totals out to $18,318.93. So let's pretend that the $8,903 is what an average person in Mexico lives like. So we can see that the average Mexican lives about as well as someone who earns $18,318.93 in the US, which is absolutely crazy to think about. But there's a quick side note. Price levels are obviously lower in poorer countries, so PPP adjustment lets us see that poorer countries are really not as poor as it is suggested by their normal GDP per capita. Because if we were looking at a very poor number and we were going to see a very low number here, then we would think, wow. But this is truly not the case, because when you compare it to the average standard of living, it's not as low as it seems. And that's the concept for everyone.